Ashley stood at the window, watching the sunset unfolding on the horizon. The sun was slowly sinking behind the tree lines, painting the sky in delicate shades of orange and pink. These moments always made her feel disconnected from the world, as if nature itself was covering her with its tranquility. She was wearing the very dress, the cream-colored silk dress that Christian had once loved so much. The dress was catching the last rays of sunlight, but today it seemed less meaningful than before. Everything had changed. As always, she didn't try to draw attention to herself. She felt like she was invisible in this world, like she was dissolving among everyone else. But her silence wasn't random. It was a silence that hid a whole storm inside. Ashley shifted her gaze to her husband's family. She saw Christian standing in the center of the hall, his arm around the waist of a woman in a red dress. It was Caitlin Smith, a new co-worker in the marketing department, who appeared to have become something much more than just a working partner to him. Ashley couldn't help but notice how she and Christian were the center of attention, how he was proudly introducing her to everyone around him. And in that moment, she realized that she would no longer wait, no longer try to keep what they had once built. To him, she had long been just a shadow. Ashley took another sip of wine with restraint. She knew that if she showed emotion openly, it would only give Christian an opportunity to make excuses, to accuse her of being weak, of being impulsive. Instead, she watched calmly as his mother, Caroline, approached the couple, and as she took Caitlin's hand with a smile. It was a moment that could not go unnoticed. There was approval in Caroline's eyes. Ashley knew that if she had glowered at Caroline the way Caitlin did, her attention would have been unavailable. Christian's mother had never fully accepted her, and she couldn't understand why everything seemed so easy for everyone but her now. Ashley continued to stand, feeling her hand shake slightly as she held her wine glass. She was in no hurry to move in their direction. Instead, her gaze slid back across the room, over the guests, all these people who had come to celebrate Christian and his parents' anniversary. This was supposed to be their event, but in this moment it seemed different. Christian was no longer her husband, and she was no longer his wife. As she approached, she met Michael Bennett, one of Christian's co-workers. He was a surgeon at the same hospital where Ashley worked. Michael was polite and reserved as always, and at this moment his gaze was directed toward her with slight surprise. "Dr. Harrison, I wasn't expecting you here today. You were supposed to be getting ready for surgery," Michael said as he tilted his head slightly, greeting her. Ashley smiled, though the smile was more of a formal one. "I've had the surgery. Couldn't miss this evening anyway. So how could I leave Christian's parents without congratulating them?" she replied with a slight emphasis on the words, Christian's parents. Michael glanced over to where Christian was standing with Caitlin and then returned his gaze to Ashley. He was clearly unsure how to behave with her in this context, but maintained an outward decorum as always. "How nice of you," he said with a smile, but his eyes were still focused on the scene in front of them, where Christian was the center of attention. Ashley knew she couldn't keep talking about this topic. Her patience was wearing thin, and each new look at Christian reminded her more and more that none of this mattered anymore. She turned to Michael, apologizing that she had to go congratulate her parents, and sat down, feeling slightly relieved for a moment, but not forgetting her intention. Walking over to Caroline and Frank, Ashley handed them a small box with an elegant wrapping that contained a gift, a rare book by their favorite poet. The gesture was in response to their recent complaint that they had lost their copy when they moved. Caroline, as always, seemed a little surprised, but couldn't help but appreciate the attention. Caroline accepted the gift, and her eyes sparkled for a second, but her gaze immediately returned to Caitlin and Christian. After Ashley said goodbye to Christian's parents, she headed to his side. Each step was a deliberate one for her, like a step on her final journey. She felt that this evening was not just a celebration of her parents' anniversary, it was her moment to close an old chapter of her life. She knew exactly what she had to do, and as painful as it was to watch it all unfold, she would not give in to her emotions. Christian was standing next to Caitlin, smiling, talking to one of the guests. He was in his place, the center of attention, and didn't even notice his wife approaching. Ashley lingered for a moment, watching him. He was completely absorbed in her, as if his world was only in this moment. Ashley calmly approached and interrupted their conversation. "Hi, Christian. Caitlin," she said, her voice even a little tone of business. She extended her hand to Caitlin, who tensed slightly, but then extended hers in return. "Hi, Ashley. It's been a while. How are you?" Caitlin replied, but Ashley could detect a note of awkwardness in her voice. Caitlin was careful to hide her emotions, but Ashley could easily read her. This was a new world she no longer had the right to enter. "I'm fine, thank you. I'm just looking around a bit," Ashley replied, looking at her husband, who finally noticed her presence. He froze for a moment, but quickly regained his usual confidence. "I didn't realize you were here," Christian said with mild surprise, trying to keep his face straight but still confused. "Obviously," she replied, smiling slightly, but there was no anger or regret in her eyes. It was simply a statement of fact. She was carrying on the conversation calmly, as if their lives were not at the center of this scene, but beyond it. Caitlin took a step back, sensing the tension between Ashley and Christian. Ashley didn't return her gaze but continued to look at her husband. He took a step toward her, clearly trying to say something, but Ashley interrupted him. "You don't have to," she said, running her gaze over his face once more. Her words were harsh, but not angry. She just wasn't going to let him make excuses. Ashley took a step back and her eyes slid down the hall where people were still celebrating. She had already made her decision, and now there was no point in saying anything they couldn't say to each other. "I need to leave. I have important things to do," Ashley said, not giving Christian time to respond. She spread her arms as if she was saying goodbye to a world that had long since ceased to be hers. Christian froze in place, his face contorted with confusion, but Ashley was already moving toward the exit. Her steps were firm. She wasn't going to stop. All she had to do was walk away and leave everything behind. Her heart was no longer tied to this place, no longer tied to this man. She had almost made it to the door when she heard his voice calling for her again. "Ashley, wait!" But she didn't turn her head. She knew that if she stopped now, everything would be ruined. She couldn't let him bring her back to this world she no longer recognized. Ashley stepped outside, and the cold air greeted her with some unexpected lightness. She could feel herself letting go of the tension that had been with her for so long. Getting into the car, Ashley felt her breathing become even. She had no regrets. This was the right decision. She could no longer be a part of his life. Ashley sat in the lawyer's office, surrounded by neatly laid out documents and checklists. The memories of the party, the looks, the words, the silence, kept rolling through her mind. She couldn't go back, that much was clear, but now it was time to make the final decisions, and nothing could stop her. Christian was no longer her husband. She had left him and his world behind, but before she could finally sever that knot, she had to make things right, and she knew this step was the last. "How do you want it to look?" Diane, her attorney, asked. A woman, discreet, professional, with a background that allowed her to see these situations with cold calculation. "Clear. I don't want to drag out the process. We've both already made our choices. I just want it finalized without too much fuss," Ashley replied, her voice calm, confident. She had already made her decision. No public scandals, no long and agonizing proceedings. She wanted to cut ties and move forward. "I understand," Diana nodded. She opened several documents and began filling them out, making notes. Ashley took her time, immersed in her own thoughts. Ashley thought about how this moment appeared to be a logical extension of her entire life. She had dedicated so many years to her job, to her business. And now that her career had begun to gain momentum, now that she was on the cusp of her true calling, she could finally be independent. And from Christian, too. Diane finished filling out the necessary paperwork and handed it to Ashley to sign. That moment when everything was decided. She signed without hesitation. Every move she made was confident, calm. She knew it was a step that had to be taken. "So, are you sure you want to leave everything intact? He didn't get any assets?" Diana asked, clarifying the details. Ashley nodded. "Yes, I don't want his assets. Let him take everything he has. All I want is my freedom," she replied firmly. "Good," Diana said, checking the final details. "I'll prepare the papers. We'll file them right after you leave. It will be a clean break. When you return to Switzerland, we'll finalize everything." She felt neither fear nor regret. It was all just a consequence of her decisions, a result of the way things had worked out over the years. She had long ago realized that happiness required sacrifice, and her past was no longer a part of her future. Ashley sat watching Diana finish her work. She felt strange, not liberated, not relieved, but confident. Every word and every movement now seemed part of a long-planned path. Ashley felt like her life was finally reaching a new level, and her divorce had become a simple matter that she could complete without wasting an ounce of her energy. "Well, that's it. I'll send the paperwork to the court tomorrow, and as soon as it's finalized, you'll get a notice," Diana said, raising her head to meet her gaze. Ashley stood up, picking up the file folder. In her hands, she felt the weight of the decision she was making, but at the same time, she felt no regret. Diane walked her to the door with a professional smile. Ashley nodded her thanks, but inside her, there was no room for socializing anymore. She had a purpose, and she wasn't going to be distracted by anything. When Ashley stepped outside, her view of the world was a little wider than before. There were many things in her life that she had left behind. Even though her career was just beginning, she could already feel her life taking on a life of its own as she determined what was important to her. Ashley got in her car and drove home. She knew she shouldn't wait for a call from Christian because for her it was all wrapped up. All that was left was to just leave and start building her new world. Ashley felt a strange emptiness in her apartment, as if the world she was leaving had suddenly become distant and insignificant. Christian was no longer a part of her daily life. Everything around her was now just a temporary state, a relic of a moment she would soon leave behind. She had a new life in front of her, and she felt empowered to shift her focus completely to the future. She felt herself releasing herself from what no longer made sense. Ashley opened the mail and her eyes stopped on a letter that came from the University of Zurich. It was the very letter she had been waiting for. The sender was Dr. Andreas Weber, one of the leading surgical specialists in Europe, with whom she had already had several talks. He was happy to tell her that their project was ready for the next phase, and that she would be expected back next week. She closed her eyes, feeling her heart begin to beat a little faster. It had all started with this letter, with this step. Now she had to be ready for her life to change 180 degrees. It wasn't just a new job waiting for her in Zurich. It was a chance to rethink everything that had gone before. A complete rebuilding of her identity and career. She left her phone and walked through the apartment. The walls that had once belonged to her and Christian now seemed alien. Everything that had been here, his favorite chair, his books, his clutter, didn't matter now. She sighed quietly and looked at the letter again. There were no tears in Ashley's eyes, no regrets. She was ready to make the move that would finally sever her past and open the way to a new future. Switzerland was waiting for her, and she couldn't afford to waste any more time thinking about it. Ashley picked up her phone again and took a few steps towards her bag, as if intending to organize the trip right away. She knew she needed to make one more call, this time to her lawyer, to speed up the process and finalize the divorce. Ashley was sitting on the couch, listening to the beeps, when the IE phone finally connected her to Diane. She felt less excitement in this conversation than determination. Everything had already been decided, and now she just had to follow through. "Hey, Ashley, how are you?" Diana asked when her voice came through the phone. "Hi, Diane. I signed all the papers and sent them to you as agreed. Make sure everything gets filed as soon as possible. I don't want the process to take too long, Ashley said with a clear determination in her voice. She knew it was up to the lawyer now, and as unpleasant as it was, she was ready for her relationship with Christian to be officially over soon. Okay, I'll do everything, but are you sure you don't want to wait? Diana asked cautiously. She was well aware that the divorce process in such a case could be painful, even if the parties had already made up their minds. No, I want it finalized before I leave. I have no intention of coming back here, and I don't want to stay in this house, even if there are things left in it. I'll be in Switzerland next week, and this decision is final. We have to speed up the process, Ashley replied. She didn't allow herself any doubts. Diana was silent for a few seconds, and then, as if relieved, said, I get it. I'll expedite the process and you'll get a completion notice in a few days. Ashley hung up the phone and sat in silence. In that moment, she felt the weight of the past finally go away. Everything had been decided. The coming weeks would be spent preparing for her new life. She was ready to leave everything behind and start a new chapter. Ashley sat on the couch, her gaze wandering around the room where everything was the same as before, unchanged. But everything was no longer foreign to her. This place where she had once felt at home now seemed alien, lifeless. She slid the glass of water to the edge of the table, letting her hand move, but not noticing it. Her thoughts went back to the trip to Switzerland. It wasn't just a professional invitation. It was her chance. A chance to start a new life. A chance to be herself. Ashley looked at her phone again. It was silent. It was strange, because usually at times like this he would call. But today, his number didn't show up on the call list. There were no messages and none of the strange anxiety that had once plagued her. Last night, the conversations with Diana, it all seemed as if it wasn't part of her reality, but an alien memory. Ashley sighed and picked up her bag. In just a few days, she would be in Switzerland, busy with her own business. She no longer belonged to this city, no longer belonged to the man who had once been her husband. Scenes flashed through her mind. How she leaves. This house. How she closes all the doors and leaves. And him staying in his world, with Caitlin, with what they were building now. The phone was silent again, and Ashley was fine with that. She wasn't looking forward to anything more. There was enough pain in her life, and she was determined not to let it poison her existence any longer. She turned her head toward the window again, where the dark lights reflected on the glass. It was a moment of peace she had never experienced when she was with him. Now Ashley felt this moment as a release. No more calls, no more waiting. Everything was going according to plan in her new life in Switzerland. Ashley sat in her office preparing for an important video call with Dr. Andreas Weber. This call was important not only for her, but for her future. She was going to discuss the final details of a program that promised to be her major career milestone. There was no time or desire to think about the past, only a new challenge, only a new goal. A chime lit up on the computer screen, and soon Weber's face appeared in the frame. He looked as confident as ever, with a smile that spoke of his determination. Ashley smiled back, immediately feeling the atmosphere shift as they began to discuss the details of the program. Dr. Harrison, it's good to see you. We are ready to finalize all the formalities for your participation in the project. How is your mood? Weber asked, his tone professional but with a hint of polite friendliness. Everything is fine, Dr. Weber. I'm ready for the next step. The program looks amazing, and I've already started analyzing all the materials you sent. Ashley replied, feeling herself sinking into her work, oblivious to everything around her before. Dr. Weber went on to talk about the details of the medical program that would be implemented at their center. Ashley absorbed every word. She knew that this was her chance, her path to the pinnacle of surgery. This project opened up new horizons for her, and she wasn't about to let them go. Next month, we will start work, and an apartment in Zurich will be prepared for you. Everything you need so that you can concentrate only on your work. We are very much looking forward to your arrival. Weber said with confidence. They continued to discuss the details, but at this point Ashley was no longer listening. She was thinking about how her life would change with each step, how she would build it in her own way. It was liberating. The airport was crowded, but it was as if Ashley didn't notice anything around her. The bag on her shoulders seemed light and her steps confident. She was ready. The moment had come, and nothing could stop her. Looking. At the other passengers, she felt a strange inner emptiness, but not in the way she had felt it before. That emptiness was now a release. She no longer felt heavy, no longer longed for what she was leaving behind. The check-in process was quick, and there she was, standing in the waiting room, still not believing that she would soon be somewhere else. In Switzerland, in a new life where there was no Christian, no world, no memories. This was her moment, her new reality. She looked through the messages on her phone, but there were none from him. He hadn't tried to find her, hadn't tried to fix what was broken. That was fine with her, because now she was certain of her decision. The flight number flashed on the scoreboard, and she stood up, heading for the gate. Ashley felt her body fill with lightness. Everything she was leaving behind was now distant, insignificant. She breathed in the cold air that smelled of new life and prepared to leave everything behind. For a moment, Ashley felt a strange uncertainty as her gaze slid down the hall, and she suddenly felt her heart slow a little. It was a moment of saying goodbye to the past, to what she had tried for so long to keep. But now, standing at the exit, she couldn't believe that all those years had been part of the life she was supposed to leave behind. She was ready. Soon she found herself on board the airplane. Ashley sat in her seat and looked out the porthole, watching the land begin to disappear below. Her whole world was over the horizon. This flight was a symbol of her new path. The plane slowly gained altitude, and Ashley sank deeper and deeper into her thoughts. She had no fear of this new beginning. On the contrary, she felt a sense of certainty as she felt her life being filled with meaning. She had realized long ago that she just needed to take a step into a new life. The flight to Switzerland was only a physical separation of her from her past, but in truth, this step was far more important. She didn't think about what was left behind, about how her life was connected to this city, to this man. She realized that this was the only path for her. There were moments when she doubted herself, thought about what she had lost, but now it was all part of her past. Ashley no longer tried to analyze his behavior, his mistakes, or his quirks. None of that mattered anymore. All that mattered was what lay ahead of her. Her gaze slid over the passengers sitting next to her, but she didn't feel the need to talk to anyone. This moment was hers alone. Soon the screen in front of her lit up with the message that she was approaching her destination, and Ashley felt her heart fill with anticipation. Now that her future was quite close, she felt no fear or excitement, only determination. Ashley looked out the porthole again at the mountains and lakes that promised her a new life. It was all foreign and new, but it was here that she felt she was finally free. As Ashley stepped into the Zurich airport lounge, her heart sank a little. This was the moment she had been waiting for so long. Her life that she had left behind was now somewhere far away, and a whole new reality was opening up in front of her. Switzerland. And even though she had just landed, Ashley already felt at home. There was no pain or regret in this new world, only possibilities. The airport was large and modern. Its clean, brightly lit corridors and high ceiling made it feel light and airy. Ashley moved through the space, still not believing that she was really here, in the place that would become her new home. She thought about her upcoming meeting with Dr. Weber and his team with whom she was to begin her work in surgery. It all seemed so logical and right in her head, a step toward independence, toward growth and development. Ashley looked at her bag once more, at the cell phone in her hand, and smiled, feeling her legs grow in confidence with each step. She knew she had a new job ahead of her, new coworkers, new acquaintances, and it was everything she could have wished for herself. It was all so clear and simple that it was hard to believe that she had previously had to try to keep something that was long gone. She passed through the exit doors, and a whole different reality unfolded before her. The glitter of the new city, its austerity and order was all she needed. The worries she had felt over the past few months vanished as soon as she stepped foot in this land. There was only light in her eyes, only confidence. As she stepped outside, a cold wind hit her face, but Ashley felt no discomfort. That wind was like a refreshment to her. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling new beginnings fill her soul. She felt the new life slowly but surely taking shape. Ashley sat in the car heading to her new home and looked at the rapidly changing views outside the window. The streets of Zurich were wide and clean, the houses were austere and elegant, and the people around her were focused and confident. It was a place that makes you feel like anything is possible here, and every moment is a chance for something more. Sitting in the car, Ashley couldn't help but feel proud. She had truly taken a step that was not only physical but emotional as well. Once here, she felt like her life was truly starting over. Everything that had been left behind was empty, devoid of value, and now a world was opening up in front of her that was full of possibilities and promise. Her thoughts returned to her work, to the project with which she was to begin her career in Zurich. This was more than just a job invitation. It was a chance to prove to herself that she could be a successful, independent, and strong woman in the world of medicine. And what lay ahead was not just her career, but her own place in this new world. The car moved smoothly through the streets, and Ashley sank back into thought. Her mind flashed back to the moments in her life when she'd tried to hold on to something, to keep it together. But now it was different. She realized that freedom wasn't just an abstract concept, it was a real choice. And her choice had been made. That choice had brought her here. Suddenly, she noticed how the city had become even more alive, as if Zurich had welcomed her. Ashley smiled and took a deep breath. She was ready for a new phase of her life, ready to start fresh. The apartment where Ashley was now to begin her life was spacious and bright. The windows looked out onto one of Zurich's main streets, and from the 4th floor, Ashley could see the city filling up with life. Her fingers couldn't keep from touching the glass of the window. She felt her chest fill with an amazing sensation. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alien in her own world. Here, in this new city, she was a nobody, and it was like an open book on which she was just about to start writing her story. Ashley was ready for it. She had every opportunity. She knew that it didn't matter who she was in the past. What mattered was that she could be anyone she wanted to be here. Everything was in her hands. She stood at the window, watching the sun slowly set, and thought that her life in this city wasn't just a chance. It was an opportunity for a complete transformation. Everything she had left behind didn't matter now. There was no room for regrets in her life. She had made a decision, and it was her decision, one that required no excuses. With each passing moment, her confidence grew. This was not just a physical change, not just a new home. This was the beginning of a new life. Ashley felt every breath she took become lighter. She wasn't used to this place yet, but she already knew that this place was going to be her new home. She could be herself, and that was the most important gift she could give herself. She took a step to her bag placed on the couch and pulled out her phone. In a few minutes, she was due to meet with her colleagues at the hospital, and that was important. But now, in this moment, as she stood in her new apartment, feeling the breeze and the light, she couldn't help but feel everything around her change. Ashley approached the hospital, taking her time but not slowing her step. The hospital was grand and modern, just like the rest of Zurich. Once inside, she noticed how the building was decorated with the same precision and modernity as her new home. Everything here was perfect, flawless. just as she had felt her life after she had made the decision to leave. Everything was new, fresh, and it was exactly what she had been waiting for. As she approached the reception desk, a slight smile appeared on her face. She felt confident, like a person who knew exactly where they were going. She had no fear, no sense of loss. This was her place, and she could feel it. The co-workers she was to work with were waiting for her in the conference room. Ashley, walking into the room, noticed them immediately. Dr. Weber, who she had already spoken to via video, greeted her with a smile. "Welcome, Ashley," he said, offering her his hand. His voice was even, but there was a friendly confidence in it. "Thank you. I'm glad to be here," Ashley replied. She felt her shoulders relax as she realized she was truly welcome here. Weber talked about the plans for the coming weeks, something she was looking forward to. Ashley listened, but her thoughts were already focused on how she would be able to apply her knowledge and experience in this system that was new to her. This was her job, her opportunity to implement everything she had learned over the years in her career. In her head, she was already making a plan for the coming days, weeks, and months. She wasn't going to waste a second. The time she spent here was going to be the beginning of a new chapter of her life. Through the window of her apartment in Zurich, she could see the shadows of night gradually taking over the city. Ashley sat in a chair by the window and looked out at the lights that flickered below. The horizon was covered in a light, reminding her how quickly the days were passing, how much things had changed. There was no room in her life for thinking about the past. At this time, she felt the lightness fill her and the emptiness fade away. Every day she became more confident in her decision. Everything was new here in Zurich, but this newness was her choice. She never thought she would end up here, but now this life seemed the most natural. As she watched the bustle below, she felt that she no longer belonged to this old world she had left behind. Every step she took was now directed toward the future. As she sat in silence, Ashley suddenly felt a slight uneasiness. It was due to the fact that she had to meet her new co-workers. She was used to working with top-notch professionals, and now she was faced with the task of proving that she not only deserved to be on this team, but was capable of bringing something new and original to their work together. Her confidence was growing every day, but still this moment required effort. She knew that the first meeting with her colleagues, the first presentation of her research, it all had to be top-notch. But at that moment, Ashley knew one thing. In this city, the opportunity to fully realize her potential awaited her. As time passed, her new life became more and more real with each passing day. But Ashley still couldn't forget what had gone before. The thought pierced her, but it didn't overwhelm her now. She had learned to live with it, not letting those memories poison her life. Ashley was supposed to meet her co-workers at the hospital today. Her heart beat a little faster at this point. This wasn't just a meeting. This was her chance to make a name for herself. She was used to working in a challenging and highly competitive environment, but this was different now. Here she had to find her way among already known professionals, and to do that she needed to show that her work was not random, that she could bring something new. Ashley walked into the conference room where she was already expected. Dr. Weber was standing in the corner talking to several surgeons. His gaze was attentive, but there was no doubt in it. He was confident in her success. That was important to Ashley. Her job was to show that she wasn't just part of the system, but a leader capable of offering new solutions. "Welcome, Ashley," Weber said as he approached her and extended his hand. His words were simple, but with an undertone that spoke of great trust. Ashley shook his hand firmly and sat down at the table where the materials were already prepared. "I'm glad to be here, and I'm ready to present to you the results of my research. It's a new method in microsurgery that we can implement here at the hospital," she said, starting the conversation. There was no nervousness in her voice, only confidence. She felt that this very moment was the beginning of what she would be doing here in Switzerland. "Interesting. Tell me in detail exactly how the method works." one of her colleagues asked, watching her every word carefully. Ashley began to explain in detail how the new approach worked, describing its important features and benefits. She noticed how her colleagues listened to her without interrupting her, asking questions and showing interest. Ashley was ready for this. Her research she had been doing in the U.S. could finally be the basis for something new and important. In this room, she was not just a speaker, but a professional who could offer a solution that could change many approaches in surgery. With each question and with each answer, she felt her confidence only grow. She couldn't help but notice Dr. Weber watching her, his gaze growing more and more approving. When Ashley finished her report, there was silence in the room. Everyone was silent for a few seconds, mulling over what they had heard, before one of the senior surgeons stood up and began asking questions. "Interesting technique," he began, making a note on his clipboard. "You say that this approach reduces a patient's recovery time by 20%, but how do you plan to adapt it for more complex cases? And can the technique be applied in conditions where the patient has additional complications?" Ashley listened carefully to the question, and her answer was confident, clear, and based on practical experience. She explained in detail how the technique could be adapted for complex cases and how additional research would enhance the potential of this approach. In response to the next question, she described the details of the technical process, ensuring that the method was safe and applicable in a variety of situations. With each question, with each answer, she felt her credibility grow. Each answer she gave was a validation, and each time she confirmed her qualifications and willingness to perform at the highest level. Ashley noticed how her co-workers began to exchange glances, talking amongst themselves. It was a sign of respect, and Ashley realized that she had finally gained their recognition. When the question session ended, Ashley felt her chest fill with pride. She felt like she was in her place, at the center of the discussion, as a professional who was not just teaching but shaping new approaches in medicine. "Ashley, your approach is really impressive," Dr. Weber said, approaching her after the meeting ended. "We are ready to begin the experimental phase. Your results will open new horizons for us. With you, we will work on this project further." Ashley nodded, smiling. Weber continued, "We will organize a meeting with international colleagues. We'll need to discuss the next steps in bringing your method to a wider audience." Ashley stood, realizing that she had truly begun to move toward her destiny. This project had become her guiding star, and she knew that there were only more opportunities ahead. Ashley sat in her office at the hospital, where everything was decorated discreetly and with the utmost attention to detail. On her desk were the latest materials for an upcoming meeting with her international colleagues, and she could feel the excitement begin to rise in her chest. This was an important meeting where she would have to show her research results and prove that her methodology was worthy of being implemented internationally. The room was silent, with only the slight murmur of city life coming through the window. Ashley concentrated on preparing the presentation, on the last details she wanted to present to her colleagues. This presentation was as much about her scientific achievement as it was about her future. Here in Zurich, she was building a career that was now her pride. Ashley looked at her watch and noticed that the time was getting close to the appointed time. Colleagues were beginning to gather in the conference room, and her meeting with them was to take place in the next few minutes. Ashley felt her confidence only grow. She was facing the most important milestone of her career. After gulping down the last sips of water, she stood up to leave the office. But before she left, she looked at her desk, at her research, at the hard work that had earned her the respect of her peers and recognition in the medical community. She knew that today her life would change again. These international meetings would open new horizons, and she would be at the center of that progress. The room was filled with people, leading surgeons, researchers, and medical professionals from around the world. There was a tense silence in the air, as if the moment itself had been suspended. Ashley stood behind the stage, her heart beating in unison with the thoughts swirling in her head. For the first time in a long time, she felt her body fill, not with anxiety, but with complete confidence. This was her moment, a moment she deserved. She reread her notes again. Every word was important. Every number was proof that her methodology really worked. The method she would present today was not just the result of her work. It was her chance to make an important contribution to medicine. It was the beginning of a path that she herself had chosen and decided to take. Switzerland was the place for her to realize her ambitions. Everything she had left behind was now just a lesson that had brought her here. Ashley took a deep breath and headed toward the stage. As soon as she stepped onto the podium, her gaze immediately met the eyes of the audience. There were hundreds of people sitting at the tables, and she could feel their gazes focused on her. Everything went blank in her mind for a moment, and then calmness came again. She knew she had everything she needed to not just talk about her research, but to impress them. The first slides of her presentation began to appear on the screen in front of her, and Ashley began to speak. Her voice was firm, clear. She never took her eyes off the audience, and gradually her confidence became palpable to everyone present. With each explanation, with each word, she felt them begin to realize that she was bringing not just a new method, but a new philosophy of approach to surgery. With each new question her colleagues asked, she answered with more and more confidence. Each question was not just an attempt to find out details, it was a chance to demonstrate that her work, her idea, had serious foundation and potential. The auditorium filled with applause. It was like that moment when the tension goes away, leaving only a sense of satisfaction. Ashley stood listening to the applause, not fully believing that she had just finished her performance. Everything was so perfect that she felt like time had slowed down. She stood, feeling her breathing slowly recover. She watched her colleagues who were exchanging impressions. There was no doubt in their eyes. Everything she had offered was appreciated. This wasn't just a scientific discovery, it was a new step in surgery that could significantly change the way patients were treated. Dr. Weber approached her as the applause died down. He shook her hand, his face expressing pride. "Brilliant, Ashley. We're all glad to have you with us. You've just shown that your method will be in demand all over the world," he said with genuine admiration. Ashley responded with a smile. She knew this was just the beginning. This conference was an important step, but she didn't stop her journey there. Here, in this room, she had shown that she could do more, that she was capable of bringing new ideas that could change many things. She inhaled the air, feeling her body fill with pride. Everything she had experienced had brought her here, and now she was ready to continue. Ashley felt like her dream had become a reality, and this was just the beginning. When Ashley returned to her apartment, she felt fatigue come over her, but at the same time it was something completely different than the fatigue she had encountered before. She hadn't just completed another day of work, she had completed the most important chapter of her life. She had proven to herself and everyone around her that her choice was the right one. A sense of accomplishment filled her. Taking off her coat and placing her diploma on the table, she walked to the window, opened it, and let the cold air in. The breeze was fresh, almost wintry, but Ashley could feel the new energy it brought with it. A new day, a new life. It was all part of her now. Zurich was a city of opportunity, and she was ready to seize every moment. She smiled, feeling her heart fill with confidence and peace of mind. She had done what she had dreamed of. She had proven that she was more than just a doctor, more than just a wife left in the shadows. Ashley was a leader. She was a professional, ready to change the world. Plans for the future began to take shape in her head. These first steps were important, but there was so much more ahead. She knew that her method would evolve and become the basis for new research and implementation in international practice. This was her moment, but now she realized that she would move forward and no one could stop her. She looked at her watch. The time was late, but it didn't matter to her. She could afford some rest, but she always knew that her day never ended. Ashley turned on the light, sat down at her desk, and began planning the next week. Now her life was complete, and she herself was becoming the woman she had always wanted to be. In the morning, when Ashley walked into the conference room, she was greeted with smiles and handshakes. There was respect, admiration, and maybe a little envy in the eyes of her co-workers. But Ashley paid no attention to that. She knew that her work, her tenacity, and her determination spoke for itself. In this moment, she wasn't just part of this team, she was its leader, the person who brought something new, something important here. "We're all here to discuss how to implement your method internationally," Dr. Weber said as Ashley approached him. "Your results are amazing, and I'm sure you'll continue to work with us. We look forward to working with you." Ashley nodded, and a slight smile appeared on her face. She was ready for this. This was the beginning of a big journey, and she was ready to be a part of it. Everything she had done and everything she continued to do was a step towards reaching new heights. Ashley sat down at the table and began answering questions, making her presentation even clearer and more accessible to everyone. She was full of energy, confidence, and willingness to move forward. Colleagues asked questions, they discussed details of the method, plans for the near future, and every answer she gave further strengthened her reputation as a leading specialist. This was her time. When the meeting came to an end, Ashley stood up and with a smile thanked everyone for their attention. At that moment, she felt her heart fill with pride. She was part of something significant, and this was just the beginning. As she left the conference room, Ashley knew her work would continue. She was on her way to great things, and no one could stop her.